Good morning, guys. I got a really good set of questions from Quinn this morning. So I want to go ahead and try to address what we have here. He's got a lot of multifaceted questions. But we'll start with your questions on the Phillips curve. I don't really have the ability right now to redraw these graphs, Quinn. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to refer back to our PowerPoint and just kind of go through it maybe a little bit slower and give you some ideas about what is going to shift the curve around and up and down and all that kind of business. So, excuse me. So that downward sloping short run Phillips curve is really showing that inverse relationship between the inflation rate and the unemployment rate. And in doing so, what it basically says, well, if we're at 8% inflation, then the unemployment rate should be down. And we see this on the aggregate demand, aggregate supply curve through an expansionary gap, or that shift to your right, I think that's your right, the aggregate demand curve, where we see inflation occurring, output levels increasing, and the unemployment rate falling. So to talk a little bit about this, let me see if this slide is going to be the one that's going to work for me. This is it. Trying to find the right slide right now. I apologize. I'm still figuring all this video chat thing out. This is probably the best slide to really talk about this. So that downward sloping short run Phillips curve is going to show you those different points of unemployment levels and inflation levels. And what we say is that we have two options. Is if aggregate demand is shifting, then we're gonna stay along this curve. So it would be like a shift from E to A would be an increase in aggregate demand, where we see the price level increasing and we see a reduction in the unemployment rate, right? And over time, with no government involvement, we'll see that negative supply shock occur, right? And that negative supply shock would actually shift the short run aggregate supply curve up. So it would follow upwards along this long run Phillips curve to this new short run Phillips curve 1. So this would be our new curve. So to put it most simply, is shifts of aggregate demand are going to move points along the Phillips curve, and shifts of aggregate supply are going to shift the Phillips curve. So the rule of thumb with this is follow the price level. And I can't say that enough. Follow the price level. So if E sub 1 here was our starting point, and we saw a positive supply shock, so we saw an increase in aggregate and short run aggregate supply, we would follow the price level. As the price level decreased and output increased, we would see the short run Phillips curve fall or move downwards, right? And conversely, if we saw a negative supply shock, we know that that's going to cause an increase in the price level. We would see the short run Phillips curve move upwards, right? And again, this is the only curve that we go back to and we say that it is going to move up or down. That's why I don't allow you guys to say up or down for aggregate supply or aggregate demand, because the short run Phillips curve is truly the only one that goes up or down. So keep that in mind. So simply enough, Quinn, I don't know if there's a more simple way to put this. Aggregate demand moves points along the short run Phillips curve, and shifts in aggregate supply shift the Phillips curve up or down, always following the price level. So if aggregate supply increases, the short run Phillips curve would shift downwards, following the price level down. And if short run aggregate supply decreased, we would shift the short run Phillips curve up, again following the price level. So I hope that is a simple enough, direct answer. Please reply in the comments if you need something else. These few slides Slides 88 through 95 are a pretty good categorization of what we're looking for in terms of those. So I do want to give you some good time in answering your real world questions, because I think that's probably the most interesting part about everything that's going on right now. Um, so a great deal about the ramifications of an emergency temporary UBI. So I think the first important thing is the bill at hand is not a temporary UBI. And for those of you who are wondering, I believe that he is talking about a universal basic income. What I've seen through the legislation is that it's a one-time payment of $1,000 to U.S. workers. In the big scheme of things, $1,000 isn't going to do a lot for anybody. I know it sounds like a lot of money, but most of the mortgages on the homes that you live in are well over $1,000 a month right now. So it might help somebody to put food on the table. I think the thing that needs to happen in conjunction with this, if they're going to institute these transfer payments from the government to citizens, is they need to put a freeze on mortgage payments and rent payments. And I don't know if they're prepared or willing to do that. I haven't read it in the legislation. Forgive me. What I do know is what I've been reading and trying to shovel onto you all. So the $1 trillion government stimulus package, from what I'm reading from the folks from Paul Krugman, the guy who wrote your textbook, and some others. I tend to follow the University of Chicago, Paul Krugman, and a few others. And I think the big fear is that it's not enough. So the stimulus package that came out in 2008 that you referenced under the Obama administration, like 2010, I think is when it was finally all the way done, was like $980 billion. I don't know if it's enough. The effects of this, to reiterate from our previous video, is the small businesses are going to be the ones that are going to take the brunt force of this. Yes, they're talking about airlines and cruise ships and that kind of thing throughout the package. But we're still going to see failing airlines. Like, I'd be very surprised if Spirit survived, or JetBlue, if they're even around anymore. I'd be very surprised if they made it. The ones who are going to make it are your big ones. Delta's going to make it. American will be fine. Now would be the time to invest in those. If you were planning on that, I'd say next Wednesday is probably going to be the bottom dollar day on those stocks. So let me just read this question one more time before I finish answering it. So as a massive government stimulus package currently being debated in the legislative and executive branches would have our stressed economy and already failing markets. All right, so what would be the effect? If we're following pure, intro to macroeconomics thought, the government's doing everything right. The Fed has increased monetary policy pretty much as far as it can. And the federal government is increasing transfer payments and government expenditures, and reducing taxes. So they're trying everything right, I think, in terms of just basic economic thought. They're doing everything right. The question is are they doing it enough? The big deal in 2008 in that first stimulus package was everybody was scared of that $1 trillion. So it was very important for Congress to keep the money under $1 trillion. So we kind of real close in there at like $980 billion. Right now, $1 trillion doesn't scare people as much anymore. A decade later, when we've seen deficits growing by $1 trillion every year anyways, people are really wondering, is it enough? Should it be $2 trillion? Should it be $3 trillion? And that is crazy for me to wrap my hands around. But the UBI that you mentioned earlier in here, that really needs to be a recurring payment, in my eyes, until the markets shake out, because we're gonna see this shudder for some time now. I think the conservative view on this is we're going to see this shudder through at least the end of 2020 and possibly into 2021, halfway through the year or so, depending on how long we stay pretty much shut indoors. We're seeing places, some western stuff, was it Arkansas or Kansas? I think I read yesterday that shut schools for the remainder of the school year. And the longer people are indoors and not spending money, the longer this is going to last. So your next question, is there any way to truly know its impact, as it is widely debated whether or not somewhat similar efforts on the Obama, or at least the last recession, ended up prolonging its harmful effects? Um, so the Obama administration and the Trump administration are going about their fiscal policies two very different ways. Um, where the Obama administration, they pushed about $700 out to working Americans. Um, the Trump administration wants to go at about $1,000. But the difference is that the Trump administration is really trying to put a freeze on taxes and taxable incomes. You're seeing state governments start to waive tax responsibilities for businesses and individuals, especially small business owners. Um, and that's the major difference. Uh, I don't know, and I really don't know if there's a way to truly project how long this is going to go. So the last part of your question is, we're currently in a socioeconomic state that we have never seen before. You are 100% right. We've never been in a situation where the American people have been on lockdown like this. Um, at least in terms of a pandemic, yeah, they're in, kind of the Red Scare and that business. People were a little bit more fearful of going about their daily lives, but they weren't being urged to stay at home. Um, and they weren't closing down restaurants and grocery stores and all that stuff. So we are in uncharted territories, and uh, operating as close to a closed economy as the United States really ever has in modern times. So I'm very interested to see what continues to happen. I read a blurb from Paul Krugman early this morning that says we're looking at a 13 to 14% downturn in GDP this quarter. So to put that in perspective, 15% of GDP, that's 15% of 15 trillion. You guys can do the math quicker in your head than I can. But that's a loss in revenue that the United States is looking at just this quarter. So we're talking, we're going to have some massive downturn. Um, and what it looks like in the long run is a who knows, Quinn. I wish I knew. We're going to see, if we're just following basic economic rules and theories, we're going to see some massive increases in unemployment rates. We should see some pretty significant increases in government expenditures for those automatic stabilizers, the SNAP benefits, unemployment benefits, and things like that. So I'm praying like crazy that all of us, um, are okay and safe and eating. So I'll end with this to say, if any of you finds yourself stressed because of this, or your parents are getting stressed because of this, I'm a phone call or an email away. I'll be happy to sit and talk and do anything that I can to support you all and your families. Have a great day. I hope I've answered your questions. I rambled for longer than I normally do, but we'll talk soon. Have a great day. My wife says hi.